Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Harneet Kaur, and I'm a volunteer with the Sikh Heritage Month Foundation. I wanted to welcome you all on our second week of programming. Thank you for attending the first seminar of our Wednesday Wisdom Speaker Series. A reminder to visit sikhheritagemonth.ca for more information on upcoming programming and to register for any Zoom events. Today we welcome Amardeep Singh, all the way from Singapore, who will be presenting Forts of the Sikh Era, Legacy of Lahore Darbar. Amardeep Singh has authored 2 books entitled Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan, and The Quest Continues, Lost Heritage, The Sikh Legacy in Pakistan. In addition, he made 2 documentaries, Peering Soul and Peering Warrior, detailing the forgotten spiritual and marital legacy remnants of the Sikh community in Pakistan. He is presently making a multi-episode documentary, Allegory, A Tapestry of Guru Nanak's Travels, which is scheduled for release in October 2021. Please welcome Amardeep Singh.
Thank you so much to the Sikh Heritage Month for giving me an opportunity. Thank you, Harneet. Thank you, Guru Nishan, for being there to manage this Zoom call. Am I being heard clearly?
Yes.
Great. So I know there are some people here who are joining from Asia, where it's a very odd hour to come on board, and I thank people from Pakistan I can see who have joined in literally at 3:10 a.m. So thank you so much. This is about our heritage. This is about the heritage that our forefathers left in 1947 in Pakistan. So I really appreciate you all making that time and effort at this odd hour to come on board. Appreciate that. Here's the structure that I'm going to take. I'm going to actually follow through a PowerPoint presentation because I feel visually what I can actually convey is far more better than my talking head. So I'm soon going to start with a visual presentation, which will have some embedded videos right in the beginning, right at the end. Essentially, it's going to be a photographic visual journey wherein I'll actually share how the empire, the Lahore Darbar, came into being and how it expanded and what are the remnants of the martial legacy that we see as footprints across Pakistan. So I'm going to just take this opportunity to first share the presentation. Just take this. Can we see the screen? Hello?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay, I've just got to figure out this thing because it stopped moving. Presentation stopped once again.
Yeah, it was slightly blurry.
Yeah, I don't know, it's got stuck. So just let me try this once again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can we see this moving now?
Yes, perfect.
Great, perfect. All right, so the legacy of Lahore Darbar. What I want to actually first start with is a bit of a background as to what's got us here. Because when the umbilical cords of the communities, because of political situations, are severed from the lands where for generations the histories had churned, then the unfortunate first outcome is the lapse of memory. And we are talking about a land where our collective history had churned for since the times of the inception of, as you may call it, a Sikh faith, which starts from Guru Nanak's time. But, but really, our DNA goes back to the pre-emergence of Guru Nanak's time, and where the religious definition of Sikh faith was not there. So we are really people from the Indus region, and in the unfortunate events of the 1947, we were severed from these lands. 7 decades later, I've had an opportunity starting from 2014 to go into Pakistan in different phases. And what I've been doing is documenting for posterity in different forms and factors so that people in the next generation don't forget these remnants. And what started in the journeys of 2014 first is on the left-hand side, the two books, which are available on lostheritagebook.com as well as on amazon.com. These were the, I mean, there are people before me who have documented, like Iqbal Kaisar Sahib, who have documented plates of some gurdwaras, and those were great works to start with. Every knowledge has layers, and I don't think knowledge can be claimed by anyone. But as long as we keep expanding the layers, we are actually adding value for the posterity. And what I see as my addition in the form of these two books is going outside of the domain of just Punjab. So Punjab has been covered very extensively, but then what the others had missed out was the people of the Indus region also had very vast footprints in the regions of Kashmir, Baltistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, and Sindh. And so these two books are not just documenting the legacy remnants in Punjab, but are going across the entire Indus belt, which is the 5 states of Pakistan in the present times. And I've had an opportunity to document the legacy remnants, both spiritual, intangibles, as well as the forts and the martial legacy at 126 cities and villages in Pakistan in these two books. On the right-hand side is what has evolved as 3 documentaries. First was The Peering Soul and Peering Warrior on the extreme right. These are available on YouTube. If you just search for Peering Soul, Peering Warrior, and write Amardeep Singh, you can get a view of these. Peering Soul covers the lost spiritual legacies, and my focus has been to drive home the point that we do remember Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib, Kartarpur Sahib, because political situation allows us to get access to these sites, but that's not what I'm focusing on. My idea in the Peering Soul is in 50 minutes to give you a glimpse of the vastness of spiritual sites, the remnants of them, where they are lying and how they are. This is a massive uh, landscape that we're talking about. One documentary cannot do justification, but it should make the people think as to how big the expanse is. On the right hand side is the Peering Warrior, where I've had an opportunity to get into a lot of forts of the Sikh era, and a lot of them are actually inaccessible. Even Pakistanis cannot get inside them. There's some divine intervention that has enabled me to get access to them, and I've been able to document them in this 35-minute documentary. You can have a look at that, and then supplement it with the reading of the books. That's what these 2 documentaries are. Then there was a strong need emerging for these documentaries to be translated into Punjabi. So what I have on the center is the Trasti Ru, which is basically a translation of Peering Soul in Punjabi for the elder generations. We are stuck because of funding situations and my attention being in the other massive project that I've not yet been able to translate Peering Warrior into Punjabi, but that is on the plate. And as soon as I start breathing from my current commitment, I will get that done, provided we can raise a little bit of funding. What we have been working on for the last 2.5, close to 3 years now, is a massive effort to actually map the footprints of Guru Nanak. And the idea here is not just the footprints of Guru Nanak, but it's a beautiful interfaith narrative because Guru Nanak did not travel to any of the Gurdwaras. So how can we retrace his journey 550 years after his life and go to the 9 countries which the oldest Janam Sakhi traditions mention about, and the purpose out of those visual documentations is to convey the message, because the beauty is that Guru Nanak has written nothing about his life, but just told us about the message of humanity. So, yet the men of faith after his life have documented his life events. So, how do you take the earliest traditions and on that you tie it in with the messages that he gave at each place, and thereafter you leave this documentation for posterity? It's a massive project. We've been on it, me and my wife, for about close to 3 years now, and we hope that the world will see it by end of this year. And we have plans to try and to translate these into Punjabi and Hindi. We'll get to that, or let's let the world see this, and if the people come along to support, we will convert it into that. Let's get down to the topic. So with this background of about 6.5, 7 years of focus on the lands of Indus and beyond, which comprises in the Guru Nanak's documentary countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tibet, in China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. We have gained some competence that now takes us beyond the Indus region. But Indus region, which I really essentially call as the region which today is Pakistan, has been my focus in the earlier days. And this presentation comes out from that focus. So what I want to show up here is uh, I'm showing in green, and you can't see the whole map of India and Pakistan. And I don't want to show that because I know the two nations will start quarreling about the moment I show Kashmir, they'll say which side is the line going from. So there's a conscious decision to suppress that because my agenda is not political. But here's what happened in 1947. The division of the Indian subcontinent into the lands that became East Pakistan and West Pakistan and India, based on, I think it's the most foolish thing to divide anything on is to divide it based on religion, right? And the outcome of that, we know where we are today. We seeded the seeds of hatred, which continue to grow in the form of what started between two communities, the premise that Hindus and Muslims cannot stay together, now keeps expanding into bigger and bigger forms that Hindus and Sikhs cannot stay together, Hindus and Muslims cannot stay together, Christians cannot stay together. We basically seeded something that I'm sure divine did not intend. We are humans and we can live together and we should aspire to live together, but we are with what we are here. And on that landmass on the west side of the Indian subcontinent, if I lay the yellow section, which is what was the Lahore Darbar, for lack of an understanding with the majority, people tend to call it as a Sikh kingdom. And I don't call it as a Sikh kingdom, but it's because of lack of an understanding that I have to use that term because historians have been calling it as a Sikh kingdom, and that's what people understand it with. I see it as a very secular kingdom, which was a Punjabi kingdom, which was being led as a Lahore Darbar, which had representation from all the faiths, not just Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs. There were generals in the army of Lahore Darbar who were Christians, and there were European generals. One of them came as far as away from California. So it was a very secular kingdom. And when the British came in 1849, at that point of time, this is what the empire looked like. It's the Lahore Darbar. And then if you take the line, what today divides India and Pakistan, the one point that you will take away from here is close to 70 to 75% of that Lahore Darbar in 1849 is today in Pakistan. And therefore, the question I always ask is that where are the remnants of our legacy? Because what we as a community, as a Sikh community, associate ourselves with the Punjab, and we say Punjab, our generations only connect with that small piece of land in India, which is East Punjab, which also is fragmented and has been reduced to a very small landmass, and we immediately gravitate towards that. Look at the expanse. And if you just don't stop here, look at the expanse beyond the political boundaries of Lahore Darbar and see how the cultural and the faith boundaries expanded, then that goes right down to Sindh and Balochistan and right up to Afghanistan. And so that's the point I wanted to make out here of this. And therefore, as I've gone through these journeys, whether it be delving into Pakistan to document the spiritual and the martial legacy remnants, I call them as legacy remnants, which need a bigger vision than just a Gurdwara centric mindset. Because when the umbilical cords got severed, the entire focus of the community has been on a Gurdwara centric narrative. And we need to change that because I always say this is religion can be a subset of a legacy. But legacy comprises of many facets, and that's what we are discussing today as one of these small facets, which is the martial legacy. But it has many more legacies like the Nanak Panthi cultures, the art, architecture, frescoes. Gurdwaras are one part of it. We can keep talking about many presentations just delving into the lands of Indus. So what I want to actually talk about it here is that when I've gone into these lands, it has been a very emotional experience for me time and again. And as we expand the base and go on the journey of Guru Nanak across 9 countries, the emotions become much more profound. and it's hard at times to express it. You keep your emotions inside you, and because you are on a mechanical job of documentation, you can't let emotions override you. And but yet, I want to start this presentation with this one video which summarizes on the martial legacy remnants. As I was standing in Lahore Fort, what did I feel? Uh, yeah.
Lahore, once the capital of the Sikh Empire, is today devoid of the community that had churned its glorious chapters from the city. In 1798, Ranjit Singh rode to Lahore, climbed the walls of the fort, and challenged Shah Zaman.
O grandson of Abdali, come down and measure swords with the grandson of Charat Singh.
Ranjit Singh created a mighty kingdom, which for the first time in 1000 years was ruled by the son of the soil. He halted the perennial invasions of the Indian subcontinent from the northwest. As I stood within the precincts of the Lahore fort, peering at the Athdhara, the eight-gated monument from where Ranjit Singh ruled the mighty kingdom, I was reminded of the painting from the past which depicts the hustle and bustle of the royal court. In that moment, the walls of the Lahore fort echoed a question from within the sounds of silence. Why is it that the glorious chapters that have churned in these lands are totally forgotten by the present generations of Pakistanis and the Sikh community? A few Sikhs who do visit these lands of their forefathers, their desires to explore the legacy footprints seldom surpasses the few functional Gurdwaras. Do they not have a responsibility to embrace us, the forgotten monuments of the Sikh kingdom? As I walked out of the Lahore fort, I sighed. I do not have an answer to this question of yours.
So while I do not have an answer to that question, I still, I think, have probed enough to know what led us to where we are and where the footprints are. And therefore, I would like to share a little bit out here. There's a lot to share, and time is going to be little with us. I'm going to move very rapidly, hoping that I park some seeds in your minds, and then you can delve into the books and the documentaries and start your own journeys of explorations of legacies which are bigger than the boundaries of religions, because we need to grow beyond that and understand every religion is respected and we need to actually give space to everything, but legacies need to be understood with a bigger landscape. And so with that, let's start with the journey. And I'm not going down to the evolution of Sikh faith and so on and so forth. I'm just looking at it from a formation of Lahore Darbar, what led to it and where what led to its civil and where we stand post its civilians. So Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, Guru Nanak was born in 1469, Guru Gobind Singh, 1709, after he's left this world. Uh, the entire political turmoil, which was leading from the ninth Guru's time, which unfortunately, I mean, starting from fifth, sixth, and the ninth Guru, we know of the political tussles that started with the Mughal Darbar, not because of any principle or religious issues. It's just because of certain political decisions. And whenever there's power, power always corrupts and power always tries to restrict people. And that's the spirit that Guru Gobind Singh actually tried to challenge. But immediately after him, Punjab went through a revolution, and Banda Singh Bahadur, he was sent from Nanded, where Guru Gobind Singh passed breath his last. Uh, Very tumultuous period. If you look at the history and if you look at the Islamic sources, the Muslim sources writing about it, this was a very challenging period from their perspective, but at the same time, from the Hindu Sikh perspective, it was like coming back and avenging literally what happened from the fifth Guru onwards till the 10th Guru. And what Banda Singh Bahadur did was really sowed the seeds of what we're calling as the giving the rights to the common man to till their soil is one of the things. Even making a reclamation after so many years of foreign invasions and empires being set up in Punjab, to say that people of the soil can also have command. But this lasted for a very short time. It sowed the seeds which grew after that. Thereafter, the period of 1716 to 38 is a period of, as I call it, as the annihilation, wherein the onslaught by the ruling dynasties in Delhi and their people, their governors in Punjab, uh, lashed back at the community, and literally the Sikh community vanished from Punjab, and they were living in jungles. 1739 to 49, foreign invasion start. Nadir Shah comes in, leading to what we have. Ahmad Shah Abdali comes in, and so on and so forth. But leading to, and Ahmad Shah Abdali's invasion is a bit later on, but this is the period it starts, and it leads to uh, very dark period in the Sikh history of what we call as the Chota Ghalukara and Vada Ghalukara, the small the smaller Holocaust and the larger Holocaust. And literally, when you're talking about 30,000 people being killed, when people were living on horses and visibility of the Khalsa tradition was not there, if you were seen as that, you would be persecuted. This was a very, very tumultuous time. And 1748 to 99, the 12 missiles start coming together and asserting their claims in certain regions. And that, the 12 missiles, lead finally to a consolidation in 1799 by Ranjit Singh, who forms the Lahore Darbar. And the remnants of the Lahore Darbar is our focus today. So I'm going to focus more on the Lahore. In fact, the entire focus is on the Lahore Darbar's remnants, and I'm not getting into the. Uh, Can you all see me? I think my lights went off. I just put on the other light. Can you all see me now?
Yeah, we can see you.
All right, great. So my lights went off. So yeah, okay. So the Lahore Darbar is what our focus would be. So I will not be focusing so much on what we have beyond the Satluj River in the East Punjab. There'll be some overlaps out here, but my focus is more on the western side of Lahore. Okay, so before Ranjit Singh forms his stakes his claim on Lahore, what were the forts? Because we're talking about forts, right? What were the forts looking like? Now, unfortunately, we don't have much of the footprints of that period because this was a very tumultuous period. Forts that were being built were around the communities, around the villages. As you're seeing, the invasions were happening, and these would be mud walls, as I would call them, which some people can call them, and some historians have written them as fort or killa so, and killa so. But the fact is, they were literally mud walls around communities, right, to protect your village area. And some of them, and all of them, being from the materials like mud, have not survived. None have survived. But I'll try and show you what actually is from a latter period, what could probably look as one of these forts, although this is made out of brick. Now, this is one of the forts of a smaller size in Killa Mia Singh in West Punjab, though it's of a latter period, as I said. But you get a sense of what I'm talking about as protection walls. And people would call them as Killa. So Killa Gujar Khan or Killa so and so forth. You'll not really find the remnants of these. This being of a latter period, you see, although the people have constructed walls on top of these, but you see the thin bricks. They've undergone modification, but these should be really low walls and with some bastions for protection of the village. That's what the earliest forts would look like, but they would not be of brick, they would be of mud, and that's why they've not survived. All right, so let's look at the period of Ranjit Singh. So when he comes on board, what's happening in Punjab? I've colored in green and in red as to what's happening in Punjab, the land of five rivers. As I said, the 12 missiles have already started staking territorial claims, and I've listed down the 12 missiles in the green, the areas of control between the Doabs, between the two rivers, as we call them, right? Although the Karoda missile was to the extreme east, more towards the Jamna belt and the Gangetic belt, but beyond that, on the western side, the furthermost west was the Bhangi missile going from Lahore up till Jhelum. And between the Doabs, the two rivers, that's how their their footprint was. What's more important is look at the red arrows, what the situation was for these missiles who did not have a combined power, but they would have the territorial claims. And once in a year, it was a beautiful system whereby once in a year in Diwali time, they would come together, they would chart out their plan. It was like a corporate organization without really a corporate structure, where they would actually chart out their plans. They would report to each other in Amritsar, and they would disperse for 1 year and manage their own. So it was a decentralized power. But yet, under one umbrella, they would come once in a year at Diwali time in Amritsar just to report to each other and to rejoice and to celebrate and then dissipate. They would fight amongst themselves also for territorial situations. It was not the perfect situation in Punjab. While there were these red arrows coming from all over, these green missiles were also fighting amongst themselves. So it's not a perfect world we're talking about. This is just like a home. In a home, you have fights between brothers, mother-in-law, sisters, and so on and so forth. A similar situation was happening in Punjab. But what is important is the seven or the six arrows coming in from the red directions, the red arrows coming from different directions, is what was compressing Punjab. So if you look at the top, is the Rajputs. India was never India as we see it today. The Indian subcontinent was a consolidation of many, many kingdoms and many, many aspiring groups. One of them was the Rajputs, the hill Rajputs, who were pushing towards the Punjab. The Gurkhas from Nepal had already reached Kangra and they were pushing towards Punjab. The English who had come in 1700s into East, into Calcutta, and from there had used the Bengal and the Purgia soldiers, what they call as a Bengal army, and moved westwards. They were on the borders of Punjab at the Yamuna, and they were pushing on this side. The Marathas were pushing the Mughals, and they post the demise of the Mughals that started asserting themselves. In fact, Marathas during the times of Abdali and thereafter had come as deep as Jhelum and gone, and as deep as River Indus, I would say, to Atak Fort and had hoisted the flag there. But they realized they were too far away from Maharashtra, and they just retreated. Right, this was before the consolidation of the Sikh kingdom. Uh, the Marathas were pushing in. There was this one person of the uh, um, from the British forces who had set up and claimed his own territory in Haryana, close to Hisar. He goes by the name of George Thomas. He was claiming his own claims onto Punjab and trying to push towards the Fulkian missile. And then what has been for 700-800 years the traditional invasions from the Khyber Pass, though at this point of time it was the Afghans who were pushing inside. This Khyber Pass was the gateway for Central Asians, whether it be from the of the Afghani origins or Samarkand or the Central Asian or the Persian Empire. They all were coming in from there. But at this point of time, it was the Afghans who were having the power and they were pushing inside. That's the situation we're talking about, where Ranjit Singh takes control, walks onto the fort in 1799, ousts the son of Ahmad Shah Abdali, who had invaded many times in Punjab, and he is said to have also blasted the Golden Temple at one instance. He ousts him and takes control of Lahore Darbar, of Lahore Fort. This is Lahore Fort, which later becomes the seat of power. Now, Lahore Fort has many layers inside it. No one dynasty can claim it, and no one dynasty should claim it because it starts back to Love and Kush. And when it was Lahore was a small city, that time it was not a fort. But as the different dynasties came in, as the Sikhs came in, they left the land, they left their own marks. As the British came in, and as now you have the Pakistan government out there, it has layers and layers of history. But anyone who goes to Lahore, most of the time, in the Sikh community, people go on religious tours. They tend to be at the Dera Sahib. They don't even step inside the Lahore fort. It's just literally a walking distance from there. If you just got to cross the road and get inside, go and acquaint yourself with the vast remnants of the Sikh period that you'll find inside this. If you see my first book, I've documented every aspect inside it. Go and have a look at it whenever you're there. Don't miss this. Uh, Now, once this has been established, what happens is the first setback for Ranjit Singh is that his major contribution, apart from the expansion of the empire, which happens later, was that he started consolidating the various missiles. It's like one brother of a family takes charge and starts bringing together the various brothers who may be having different opinions to make them understand that we, the Punjabis, are one, be it whatever religion. We are one, and we need to come together for one single cause to protect our own lands from constant invasions that have been happening. And that's his key contribution out here. He starts bringing together people. The missiles start coming together. And he puts up a secular empire which comprised of, as I said, the officers from, there were many Muslim officers in his empire, Hindus were there were European generals inside it. But the biggest setback to him was in the Treaty of 1809, because the British, as I said earlier, were already uh, sitting at the Yamuna and eyeing the Punjab, because that was the last empire that they actually annihilated and what became later on as British India, but it was an independent country at that point in time. And they wanted to get inside Punjab because Afghanistan was the place of great game where the powers that the British feared was the Europeans and the Russians, the Tsars, because they had a direct access to India through the land routes, and British had come into India through the sea route. And uh, if the two powers, Napoleon and the Tsars, came together, the French and the Russians came together through the Central Asian, they could come to Afghanistan, and that was the period known as Great Game, which unfortunately Afghanistan is still continuing to be a part of the Great Game, though the powers have shifted from the Asian subcontinent to across to other European places, to US, to other places. The players have changed, but Afghanistan is still a consequence of the Great Game, even in present times. But that time, the three powers were the Russians, the French, and the British. British were afraid that these two powers, if they enter Afghanistan, the next is that they will enter in, and if Ranjit Singh partners with them, that probably will be a mighty force which they can't actually hold against in the India that they had created, which was till the Yamuna belt. So they started pushing towards Punjab. And the unfortunate thing is that what we see as today's East Punjab, what Sikhs connect with as Punjab, actually, that is the area, the Sis Satluj, the east of Satluj territory, are the first ones who aligned themselves with the British. And Ranjit Singh's aspiration was sealed. And as you see the red line, Satluj. And the Treaty of Amritsar in 1809 restricted Ranjit Singh now to come eastwards and talk to his brothers, which was the Fulkian missile and the other missiles on this side, to say that let's all come together. They severed that ability to do that. And it was not British doing it, it was our own brothers who actually partnered with it. And sometimes I wonder, it probably is a study from a cultural and socio-cultural military aspect for today's Punjab in East India, what the Sikh community associates with are the perils and the problems of this land, seeded in what happened in 1809, where we could not trust our own people and we decided to side with a foreign power. That's the land that we consider as our land today. And is that the seeding of the mentality that we have actually gripped ourselves with? That we are in the midst of conflicts. We can't trust each other today in Punjab. There are problems of drugs and there are problems of. I don't want to get into that, but it's something that I wonder about. I wouldn't have an answer to this, but I take it back to 1809 to ask myself this question: if this area could not trust the other brothers, and we partnered with someone foreigner, uh, are we and we all landed in that area, are we seeding? Are we suffering the consequences of that area? I don't have an answer. I don't mean to belittle any territory. It's a PhD question if anyone wants to take on. I don't think that's my focus. I just parked something out. All right, just moving on. So what happens thereafter is this all the green area that you're seeing. I just want to actually highlight out here, this green area was not with Ranjit Singh as of that point of time in 1809. He literally just had that yellow area, Lahore, Amritsar, and and he started staking claim in that whole green area, saying that this is the Punjab, the land of five rivers. And he started claiming this area. But claim then comes with a lot of conflicts, but his control was only in the yellow area, and he had foregone the east of the red line of the Satluj area, and now starts the story of the forts that we're talking about. So, 1802 to 1834, there are many expeditions that are led by the Lahore Darbar, and these go southwards to Multan, close to where the five rivers of Punjab merge into the Indus River, and and the identity of Punjab finishes at this point because the rivers of Punjab uh, become one with the mighty Indus at this point of time. Close to Multan, he starts staking claim for that. He starts making claim towards Attock. Then he goes towards Srinagar. Then he goes westwards towards Khyber Pass at different periods of time. But these expansions don't lead to a immediate conquest. It takes a lot of effort to get these places. So 18, we'll start with Multan. Multan was under Muzaffar Khan, an Afghan ruler. From Lahore, it takes many campaigns. It takes something close to eight campaigns, finally leading to. I mean, he only had control. Revenues were coming in after a few of these campaigns, but there were conflicts. There were pushbacks happening. Finally, the seal was laid in 1818. But before that, we can say that yes, there were claims being put down, but there were many battles that were fought with Muzaffar Khan, finally leading to a conquest in 1818. That's the southwards, 1802 to 1818. Wasn't an easy conquest, right? And in this battle, I want to show in Lahore, near the museum, is lying this Zamzama gun, the Zamzama cannon, which is wherein it's basically what is also known in our history as Pangyawali Top. It was uh, it was basically in the possession of the Bhangi missile. The history of this cannon is in all forms and shapes. Some say that Ahmad Shah Abdali took it, and some say it was made much before that. Some say Bhangis made it. Point is not that, but this is the cannon which was used. In the invasion, in the final conflict in 1818, this cannon was moved from Lahore all the way to Multan. And if you see the distance that we're talking about, it was moved all the way to Multan. And uh, and and it led to the victory of the Multan fort. Unfortunately, and Ghulam Zilyani, the soldier, pens that the one of the wheels. I don't know how true this is because a lot of time, a lot of stories that get written are with a little bit of spice out here. So I'm not authenticating this story, but I'm telling you what has he written. He was one of the soldiers in Ranjit Singh's army, and the name tells you it was not just Sikhs who were fighting. So the people who claim this to be as one communities need to step back and say it was a Punjabi empire, right? And Ghulam Jilani, who was willing to give up his life, he says that the wheel broke down, and each time to give support to the wheel, someone would keep his shoulder. I find it hard to believe because a cannon of that might cannot rest on one's shoulder, but still he writes that's a story, right? And he says he was at each time they would fire it, the person would perish, and he was the 117th on the line to put his foot there, put his shoulder there, and at the 116th firing, the battle was won, and the forces basically conquered Muzaffar Khan. But what I want to actually show is an interesting painting on the right hand side, and this is something that one looks at from an art perspective. Always history is his story, whose story you want to hear. Today you are hearing my story, and I'm telling you it has biases in it. If I'm going to hear someone else's story, I have to accept in mind that it is a biased story because there are biases that everyone creates. And here's a proof of that on the right hand side. Uh, Ali Singh Nalwa leads the campaign, and uh, typically in art, the victor is always shown to be on top, right? And This painting is made in post 1947. It's there in the Multan Museum right now, but it's made in the post 1947 era. And because we are divided and we think only on religious grounds in the present times, therefore Hari Singh Nalwa cannot be on top, and so therefore Muzaffar Khan is on top. It's a minute observation, but this is how narratives are created, right? I'm not trying to say Muzaffar Khan could not have been on top in the battle between the two, but how the history is projected is what I'm actually talking about. Anyhow, let's move on to his further westward conquests in 1813 to 1819. He makes push towards the west and goes to the Indus River, something that no one had done for 700-800 years from, in terms of the people from the soil. And 1813, he goes towards Attock. 1819, he goes towards Srinagar, conquers it. But these conquests did not just happen in that year. Like Multan campaign, many campaigns happened that led us to that direction. But that's when the conquest happened, final sealing of the territory to be a part of Lahore Darbar. Let's start with Kashmir. Kashmir happens in 1819 finally. This is the Haripamba. Kashmir is actually a part of the Indus Belt. I don't see divisions of India, Pakistan in this work. I have therefore tried to give you some footprints from Kashmir too. If you go to Srinagar, the Haripamba fort, which was made by the Afghans, uh, if not for the Lahore Darbar, which conquered it in 1819, sometimes I humor. I say, you know what, India and Pakistan are spilling so much of blood over Kashmir in present context, and every narrative is about Kashmir. But what people have forgotten, it was a part of Afghanistan from 1753 to 1819. It was an Afghanistan empire, a part of that. And it was only in 1819 when Lahore Darbar, under the leadership of Ranjit Singh, made Kashmir a part of, and Ladakh later on, a part of the Lahore Darbar, that the British India in 1849, when came into Lahore Darbar, took over this lock, stock, and barrel, divided and gave the custodianship to the Dogras, and that's a different history. But I always say, do you even know the contribution of Ranjit Singh in this turmoil that we have created for ourselves in this region of the Indian subcontinent? Kashmir, if not for Ranjit Singh, would continue to be a part of Afghanistan. Probably the division that we have created between India and Pakistan, we would at least be at peace in present times. And yes, Kashmir would be destroyed by the foreign invasions if that was happening. I'm not trying to say that that's what I propose, but what I'm saying is that that's what the history could have been. But history is what it is, and we are just trying to see what if scenarios out here. Uh, so Mahmud Shah Durrani overthrows Shah Shuja, who in Afghanistan, it's in Kabul, and Shah Shuja actually has the Kohinoor diamond, which has come to him through Ahmad Shah Abdali, who actually got it. He was a soldier under Nadir Shah, who Nadir Shah got it from Delhi in his invasion of India, and that's how Shah Shuja, who was a descendant of Ahmad Shah Abdali, got the Kohinoor diamond. And when Mahmud Shah Durrani overthrows Shah Shuja in Kabul, he comes towards Punjab. And Jahandar Khan imprisons him, who was also an Afghani, in Attock Fort and keeps him imprisoned out there. And thereafter, he was sent to Kashmir because Kashmir was a part of Afghanistan. And he was imprisoned in Kashmir. It was in 1813 when Wafa Begum, Shah Shuja's wife, requests. She has come to Lahore and taken refuge under Ranjit Singh, and she's staying at Lahore, and she requests Ranjit Singh's intervention to free Shah Shuja. That the first expedition happens in 1813 to Kashmir. Ranjit Singh gets in, but he's able to get the Kohinoor diamond. He's able to implant himself there, but it's not a sustained rule as yet. Finally, multiple invasions, and then 1819 is when the conquest of Kashmir happens and becomes a part of Lahore Darbar. This Hari Parbat fort is what is the representation of different dynasties who have ruled in Srinagar. And what I'm showing you on the board on the right hand side, at the entrance of Hari Parbat, it also talks about later on. Look at that circle portion. Later on, the Sikhs in the Dogra period also ruled in this region. Uh, as I said, we go back here to this one. 1813, the westward push towards Attock starts happening towards the river Indus. And that's the piece I'm going to talk about because on the way to the Indus, you have to cross Jhelum. And close to Jhelum, there are many sites associated with Guru Nanak, the Sikh Gurus, Guru Gobind Singh's family, and also this fort called the Rohtas Fort. I am standing inside on the right hand side. I'm standing inside the remnants of the Chua Baba Guru Nanak Gurdwara, which was built in the memory of Guru Nanak, who visited the Tilla Jogia, a mound where the Jogis used to be there, the Nath Jogis, the Kanfattas who would split their ears would be there. And he had a Siddh Ghost dialogue with them out there. And the memory, in that memory, this Choha Baba Guru Nanak Gurdwara was built below the Tilla, below the mound. And from the remains and the ruins of this Gurdwara, in 2015, I clicked this picture towards the Taksali gate of the Rohtas Fort. Now, Rohtas Fort is a sprawling complex made by Sher Shah Suri. Again, like most of these big forts in Punjab, no one dynasty can claim on it. But yes, at this point in the Ranjit Singh's time, he took over Rohtas Fort, and this then opened up the gates to go towards Attock, go towards Kashmir, because from Jhelum, Kashmir is very nearby. But that's not how they went. They went from a different route to Kashmir. But 1813, they conquered the Rohtas Fort. Now we move further west. We are now moving towards the Khyber Pass, and at the river Indus, which is this is a view of the fort, Attock Fort, standing on the other side of the Indus River, and I'm clicking this picture. This was in the making of my first book. This entire fort is even Pakistanis cannot enter this fort because it's all under army control. In my documentary Peering Warrior, I have a section where I actually, in my second trip, or my trips thereafter, but the trip for my second book, I was fortunate that I was able to meander myself to get inside the fort. So we are one of the very few people post partition from the lands of Pakistan where our forefathers belong. I consider it as a fortunate blessing that the divine gave it on my lap that allowed me to enter inside this fort. It's an experience which probably will never repeat in my lifetime. But when it happened, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't understand how it's happening. But when you're inside the fort, I have documented certain areas inside the book, the second book. This is the Attock Fort, which was a pride possession of the Afghans. Akbar built it in 1581. It changed dynasties. The Afghans were ruling in it, and it was here that Shah Shuja was kept in the person who had the Kohinoor diamond, which Wafa Begum carried to Lahore. It was here that Jahandad Khan kept him imprisoned. Then Jahandad Khan was also an Afghani, but just the change of powers in Afghanistan. This is where he was kept. And when I went inside, I want to actually bring out one interesting thing. I'm just because of I can't show everything here, and you'll find that thing covered in my documentary. But I'm showing one remnant inside the fort, which I happened to locate. And interestingly, the Pakistanis were not aware of what it was. So I've documented in my book. There was a temple and a Gurdwara in the same complex next to each other. And while we are today fragmented and we are leading towards more of hardening of boundaries, but these remnants, these things that actually tell us of where our past, where our roots were from, should make us think before we take any steps, right? I'm not trying to point out any community, but in the temple, it talked about its association with Nanak. In the Gurdwara, this is from the Gurdwara. It writes up there for those who can't read Gurmukhi. It says Ek Onkar, is फर्श दी सेवा कराई श्रीमती मनोहरा देवी सुपत्री नालाजी परजामल आनंद पेशोवर अंदर शहर वाले. So Lalaji Parjamal Anand of Peshawar, his wife, Shrimati Manohara Devi, put this installed this foundation stone for this Gurdwara. And this is where I sometimes feel, where are we heading today? Because we have forgotten our roots. We have forgotten, we should strive to be towards oneness and not towards divisions. It's not, it doesn't lead to anything. We have to learn from 1947. We should not repeat further, further divisions between communities and humanity. And rest you will find it in the documentary and my books. I'll move on from Atak. This is the interesting part of the explorations. 1813 onwards, once the attack is under control, the push starts first northwards to the region which is known as Hazara, and thereafter westwards towards the Afghanistan border. Now, I must point out one thing out here. Sometimes it's very hilarious in this so-called I mean, historian. I'm not an historian, but I'm a passionate guy who tries to study, right? I'm an engineer by background and an MBA, but this is my passion, right? But everyone becomes a historian, and I find maps of showing Ranjit Singh's empire extending right into Afghanistan. And I say, no, it was right up till the Durand line, which today Pakistan and Afghanistan, which is the boundary of Afghanistan and Pakistan, but that is just next to Peshawar. So when people start doing this, fanning their egos, it doesn't stop. I mean, it doesn't stop. It just goes into Afghanistan and everywhere. People step back and look at it. But the reality is here. It took a lot of effort in 1813. Attack. From here, the push started upwards. It is documented that in this region, there were 27 forts which were built to barricade invasion routes from the Khyber Pass, which is beyond Peshawar. Because once you barricade this, and I'll show it in the next few slides, how this strategy was emerging from from a bird's eye view. I don't know if that's how Ranjit Singh and his people were thinking, but as people later on in history who have a bird's eye view try and give some structure to the madness, then you see there was a structure. But I see first is the listing down of 27 forts, and most of them have perished. We went and searched for many of these forts. They don't exist. History has been very harsh, but these forts were being built in a very tumultuous time, in a very rapid pace. And then the powers changed very rapidly. And in that period, they could not survive. Let me take you to one of this fort, which has survived, Haripur, Harkishan Nagar, Harkishan Garh, which Hari Singh Nalwa was the general who was given the Hazara region by Ranjit Singh. I mean, his early days, he fought in the Multan campaign and many other campaigns. Finally, he was made the governor of Hazara region, and thereafter the Haripur region was named. The city of Haripur is named after Hari Singh Nalwa. This is the remnants of the fort. What you see as on the right hand side of this, you see the thick bricks. This probably dates back to that time of Ranjit Singh. Then you see on the right hand side a very structured outline, which is basically the British era. And you've got these places for the water to seep out, but that's the British era. But you go inside this fort, you'll find both the eras remnants are there, but very hard to get inside. I mean, you can get inside, but it's even between the 2015 and now, when I went back in 2019, even many of these bastions have all been brought down. Land is a premium these days. These structures are of no value to anyone. And if you can bring down these structures, the land is where you can create plazas and other things. Who cares for heritage? Who cares for past? Who cares for history, right? So things will finish off. But these are the last remnants. Right hand side, I'm trying to show Hari Singh Nalwa, unfortunately, in our Sikh history, sometimes I say, you know what, we've got to look back. We are making many of these films and we create so much of an aura around them. You know, don't get me wrong, they are all a part of our history. But is that the only history? Where is the softer side of the history that we will project through our documentaries, through our other efforts, right? When I look at the I mean, I'm not trying to belittle anyone, but I'm just trying to say everything has a space in history. But we made documentaries, or we made movies on Char Sahibzades and others, and they find a place in our history, right? What about the softer sides also we have to make, right? Do we want our next generation only to understand and remember only the turmoils, but also the softer corner, which is the beauty of Guru Nanak and the beauty of the Sikh Gurus and how they've merged with the other cultures? How will we bring that in? That's why I'm saying Hari Singh Nalwa, while he's projected always as a ferocious man, what about his other softer side? You look on the right hand side, the Rangila Canal that he built, which made this entire region so fertile. From Dor River, he pulled in the water, he built this canal, and that became the place. Today's Malta growth, the oranges that grow in Haripur, a lot of people trace it back to thanks to Hari Singh Nalwa's vision of bringing in the water into that region through the Rangina Canal. Where do we actually bring in that administration qualities of Hari Singh Nalwa? Why do we always have to project him with a one-sided lens of just war, war, war? What about his administrative leadership qualities? I think our narratives need to be balanced. And that's how we will project personalities that we should emulate. Because that's what life is. Life is not just one-sided. Moving on further, in the hills of Hazara near Mansehra. This is a fort which is now under the family of my dear friend who are the basically the Nawabs of the region. And the region now, after the creation of the Tarbela Dam, is all under the water of the Tarbela Reservoir, and their family has moved to this place, which was earlier a fort built by Hari Singh Nalwa. You see on the top there are embrasures actually for keeping the guns, but on top of that now they have built the roof, and so it looks like a home. If you look closely, it actually is a fort which was built by Hari Singh Nalwa. And on the right hand picture, I want to show on the right hand side the small hillock on top had a small picket on top, which also I have had an opportunity to look at, and that picket there would be typically some soldiers sitting there to keep a watch over this fort. Right? This is not really a fort, but it shows the expansion when it was happening. The Battle of Naushera at Pir Sabak village, close to the next to Kabul River, which goes and joins the Atak River. Akali Phula Singh died here. And what I say is, history needs to be looked from a wider perspective. It's easy to bias the history. I say there's a bias that's been created here. This is the remains of the Gurdwara on the right hand side. On the left hand side, you see the memorial that's been created and which is all in ruins. This memorial was created in the memory of Akali Phula Singh. But history has been silent about the contribution of the Nepali soldier, the Nepali general, Balbhadra Kunwar, who also fought at this place on the Kabul River against the Afghans and also was martyred along with Kali Phula Singh in the Battle of Naushera. He was a Nepali soldier who became a general in the army of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. But history that we have written is silent about Balbhadra Kumar. How do we bring in the two aspects to make it an all-inclusive history is something that we need to think about, right? I want to move to a fort, which is the Shab Qadar Fort, again inside. It's close to Peshawar. We are moving now westwards towards the Afghanistan border. The Shab Qadar Fort is a very well-maintained fort. Outside wall is what you see is the bricks or the stones from the old structure. Inside it has got many. It's with the Frontier Constabulary, which is like the border security force of the in the Indian side, Frontier Constabulary of the Pakistan Army, uh, and uh, and basically they've got a lot of establishments inside, all modern structures. The outer wall is what gives you a flavor of what the fort was. It was constructed in 1837. Shab Qadar was known as Shankargarh Fort earlier. In the history, it's called as Shankargarh. Uh, the history writes about it being made on a mount, which was earlier called as Sikho Tehri. Sikho Tehri. Tehri is a mount. And Sikho because the followers of the Sikh faith would reside on this area, and that's where so it was a community living out there, and that's where this fort came to be constructed. But what's interesting on the right hand side is that in 1840, after Ranjit Singh has died in 1839, in 1840, when his son Sher Singh was visiting the fort, the Afghans knew that the Sher Singh is here, and Ventura who was his general, a European general, was the commander of this fort from the Ranjit Singh's time, and he was hosting Sher Singh, and the Afghans attacked in the night in 1840, and they managed to breach the walls, the gates, and get inside. And the next day, this was a source of embarrassment for Ventura. Sher Singh, son of the Lion of Punjab, who was now the king of Punjab, was here, and the breach happened. Now, Sher Singh was also very smart that he knew Ventura is a very able commander. A mistake has happened. So a court martial was held, and Sher Singh presided over this court martial. And the verdict that was passed was it was not the fault of Ventura. It was not the fault of the soldiers who fought very bravely because they managed to get the Afghans out. It was the fault of the gates, which were too weak to protect the invasion. So the gates were sentenced for 100 years of imprisonment to be chained to this tower. And these gates, even 100 years have crossed by, are still chained on this tower. So when I was there, I jokingly told the commander of the Frontier Constabulary that I think you should release these gates. I think you should not, because if you release this, a chapter of history will be forgotten. So keep it tied here. They've served their 100 years of imprisonment. This is the Mansehra Fort, which is now a police station. It has changed hands, but Mansehra, Mahasingh of Mansehra, the governor after Hari Singh Nalwa, laid the foundation of this small structure. Today, it doesn't look like a fort, but if you really break this, if you actually uh, uh, tap on these external plasters that they've made, and if somewhere it starts cracking, you'll see the real bricks behind the boulders that have been used. It doesn't give a feel of a boulder. It looks like a modern structure, but it's made with boulders. And this was uh, created after 1837, after Hari Singh Nalwa died. Uh, I want to show in Katas Raj, close to Jhelum, uh, the the residence and a small bastion fort where Hari Singh Nalwa would stay. And this is through that I'm looking at the Katas Raj uh, section. I mean, unfortunately, in the renovations that have happened, because these sites were lying abandoned when in 1900s, when I forget the date, was it 1900s or late 1900s or early 2000s, when Lal Krishan Advani was visiting Pakistan. In a hurry, he said, I want to visit this place of Katas Raj because it's got importance in the Hindu religion. And when the Pakistan government started the renovations, they put a board out here which calls it as a Ramchandra Temple. And once you put a board, it's very hard to take history back. But the Government of India notifications dating back to the British time, I've given the notification reference here, 12th April 1921, very clearly says that this is an archaeological department notification that this was a monument built by Hari Singh Nalwa and served as his office. And some say it also had a Gurdwara inside it. But now I think it's gone. It's called as the Ramchandra Temple. Uh, as we went westwards in the Indus region, I did talk about the Tarvela Dam and the entire Indus being have armed state being submerged inside the Indus River. This is the silting of the Indus River. Uh, what took us? There's some kind of a madness that takes you into these quests. And what was the madness to look at this place? Why did I go there? There was no forts. But I told you there were 27 forts in these regions, and all of them have perished. But what was it that took us here? It was very hard to get in here. And me and Jahandad Khan went here, and we stood at the same place. Somewhat, we looked at what it looks like, and what is on top is from the book called The Highlands of India by D.J.F. Newall, which he wrote after the British came into Punjab, and he has sketched a particular, which we believe is the same place. He sketched standing at the base of the Indus River. Today, the Indus River is all silted. So we are standing on the top of a mound, and therefore the perspective of the mountains look to be a bit lower in my photograph, but actually are looking more pronounced because it's sketched from a bottom, and I can't go to the bottom because it's all silted now. You can't stand there. He is talking about, I've colored in this picture, Gandhar Fort, Tripalion, Fort of Darban, all the forts of the Sikh era, and and where the British camp was when he went in. And For me to stand here while I can't find the forts, but to feel the energy and the topography of where these things had existed, I took this panoramic photograph and I've given it in my second book, The Quest Continues, just because it needs to be documented. Now, moving on, I'm going to jump after Srinagar was taken over, uh, and now the center region of Haripur and the region of Hazara has been taken over. Now the focus starts towards the westward side. Now, Peshawar did not come into the empire very easily. Those who write history saying that it was a part of the empire and it was a mighty distinct, keep in mind it took 1818 to 1834, that many years, repeated expeditions to finally stake claim of Peshawar as being a part of Lahore Darbar. It was not easy. This is at the gateway to Afghanistan we're talking about at the Khyber Pass. It took a lot of effort to get Peshawar. And when Peshawar came in, this is the Bala Hisar Fort. Bala Hisar Fort was constructed by the Mughal era and it has layers of history, like the Lahore Fort. But I'm focusing on the Sikh aspect. When you go inside the Peshawar Fort, you will find there's one inscription which is still there, which reads the inscription on the arch gate pertains to the Sikh dynasty. The Sikhs invaded Peshawar, rebuilt the fort, and named it Samirgarh. But actually, it was our history writes it as Sumergarh. And Sumer is a mythical Meru mountain, which some in the Hindu mythology it refers to the pinnacle of spiritual achievement, the Meru Mount inside us. Physically, it's a space given to Kailash mountain in Tibet. It was never known as Samirgarh, but they have written it here as Samirgarh. It was actually Sumergarh. I want to actually point that out. This inscription reads as follows: Victory to Purak, Kalpurak. Through the grace of Shri Akal, under the liberal government of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Bahadur over the region of Peshawar in the year 1891, Vikram Samvat, which is AD 1834, this was built by Raja Bikramjit and named Samirgarh. Raja Bikramjit is basically Ranjit Singh is what we're talking about. Ranjit Singh built it. So there are two errors, Ranjit Singh and Samirgarh, Sumergarh, basically. But Peshawar was not an easy place to hold on to. It's the first time after 700 plus years that the men of the lands actually stake claim and westward from Punjab and stake claim out here. Just a few kilometers, about 30 kilometers from Peshawar, is the place called as Jamrod, where Hari Singh Nalwa died. Now, this is, I've been able to go inside the fort, but this is a picture from my first trip when I was not able to go inside because it's under the Pakistan Army. And but it looks like a small fort, but when you go inside, you'll find it's actually quite a massive structure. But its strategic importance is the following. As I stood at the bastion in my second trip, and I looked at the Khyber Pass from the bastion, this is the strategic importance of this fort, that it was built at a place where the Khyber Pass could be checkered, could be seen. And once the history is a fact that once this fort was built in 1836, it said it was built in 54 days. Right? It was built thereafter, even in the history of Pakistan or the British or the Sikh era after 1836, there have been no invasions eastwards from Khyber Pass. Now, is it a coincidence? I don't know, but I can say that the seedings of plugging the Khyber Pass is in Jamrod Fort in 1836, because thereafter there have been no eastward invasions. This is something which I want to tell you as a bird's eye view, and I'm wrapping this up quickly. And then after that, if you look at, I'm trying to analyze these presence of these forts to see what were they thinking. Were they thinking that way? I don't know, because I can't get into the minds of these people. But we can see the structure in the madness. The structure is the following. From Kabul right through the Khyber Pass, which is on the left-hand side, the invasions had been happening for 750 odd years. They would cross the Michni, the Durand line, where it goes through, which defines the Pakistan and Afghanistan border. They would cross the Khyber Pass again to Jamrod, and from there they would come to Peshawar, take rest there, and then from Peshawar they would establish, once you establish Peshawar, whichever dynasty comes in, Now you can aspire to go eastwards into the Indian subcontinent. And there would be two routes. One would be the lower route, which will take you to the Atak Fort, cross the Atak River, get into Lahore. If you got into Lahore, now Delhi is not very far away. And to Delhi you reach, then you go deeper down, like has happened with every invaders that have come from the Central Asia. They've gone deep inside the Indian subcontinent. The other route from Peshawar is the northwards route, which takes you to Kashmir. But for that, you again have to go to Darban, where actually we stood and took that panoramic view of the picture, where we say many forts were constructed in those regions. From there, the invasion route would take you across the river and there the Indus River, and thereafter you go right into Kashmir. And that's how Kashmir became a part of Afghanistan. It's through this route it became part of Afghanistan. But to look at the placement of forts along the Indus, I'm not talking about Punjab. We've left Punjab now. We are coming towards the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area. And we're looking at the first line of defenses on the left-hand side. All these forts, the Michni, Shabqadar, Jamrod, Peshawar, Burj Hari Singh, it's there in my book. But these are all the forts that existed here. Bala Fort, these were the first line of defense along the Khyber Pass. On the second line of defense along the river Indus are about 27 forts that were built in. Many of them don't exist now. And thereafter, you get into Punjab, which is really the heartland, right? So that's how they were thinking about it. And the strategy doesn't end there. Ranjit Singh continues, as I said earlier, Kashmir having come inside. Ladakh actually was a part of Tibet. At that time, Tibet was a separate country. China was not in Tibet. When China took over Tibet in the 1950s, I argue, again, these are all only what if scenarios. If Ranjit Singh would not have gone into Ladakh in 1834, his general Zorawar Singh led the expedition. And if Ladakh had not become a part of the Lahore Darbar, today, Ladakh would have been a part of China because it would have been still with Tibet. And when Tibet was annexed by China, it would be a part of China. Now, Ladakh has always historically been known from an ethnic cultural perspective. It's an extension of the Tibetan culture. The Takhis are all Tibetans. The language is similar. The belief system is similar. It is the sons of the king of Lhasa were given three sons were given empires. One was the Gugi kingdom, one was the Zanskar, which is in India, and the other one was Ladakh, the Leh. Three sons were there. And Zanskar and Leh is thanks to the Lahore Darbar's expansion that today they are part of India. And once Ladakh became a part of India, the Balti people are basically having the DNAs of Tibetan culture. The culture is today, if you see the Baltistan in Pakistan, the Skardu region, Gilgit region, while today the languages have changed, it's now they are all followers of Islam, but the languages have now changed to they moved away from Balti script. Balti script had its origins from the Tibetan script, but they only use Urdu now. But very few people, and I've met some of them, about 80, 85 years old, they can still read the Tibetan Balti script. So this congruent region from Ladakh extended right up till Baltistan. Once Ladakh was taken in 1840, when the Lahore Darbar expanded westwards further and got into Skardu, this is immediately after Ranjit Singh's death. So Skardu became a part of the Lahore Darbar. When British came in, thereafter Baltistan became a part of the Indian subcontinent. And otherwise, these parts would be with very, very different empires. So we need to give due credence to the vision of the Lahore Darbar. I am going to bring this to an end by saying just one interesting point out here. From Ladakh, there was an aspiration. This is after Ranjit Singh, when the expansion was happening. The aspiration was that can we go westwards and checker the British India? Now, this is not openly written because in those days, British was a mighty empire, Punjab was a mighty empire. Both would not touch each other. Both were playing the cards. Punjab was playing a very different card. It's a very interesting card. But they were looking at going upwards north and saying from the high altitudes of Tibet, can we enter Nepal and partner with the Nepal and thereby get into the lower lands of British from Uttarakhand region and checker the British. No one would talk about it. But the strategy was very clear. From Ladakh in 1841, they went westwards under Zorawar Singh, Basti Ram, and Ghulam Rasul Beg. Three battalions went eastwards into the Tibetan plateau. This probably is the highest battleground at Taklakot. And you know what? I find it so hilarious today in our divided worlds that people when you write about Zorawar Singh, the first response comes in is, was he a Sikh or a Hindu or a Dogra? And I say, you know what? I worked for American Express for so many years. No one asked me my religion. My loyalties were with my employers, American Express, for good 21 years. Whatever be the faith, even Ventura, who was a Christian, his loyalty was to the Lahore Darbar. Be it whatever is the faith of Zorawar Singh, he was getting a payment, a salary from the Lahore Darbar, and therefore he was not leading a religious war out here. He was not leading a jihad out here. He was going into the Tibet under the expansion policies of the Lahore Darbar. So where does the religion come inside this? And if religion has to be brought in, then why do we choose to forget Zorawar Singh, who, yes, was a Dogra, was accompanied by Basti Ram, who also fought in the Battle of Taklakot, and Ghulam Rasul Beg, whom history has forgotten totally. No one knows where Ghulam Rasul Beg vanished fighting. Why do we forget this composite forces which were beyond religions? Anyhow, bringing this to an end, they went close to Taklakot in the Mount Kailash Sarovar region at the high altitudes in September 1841. Zorawar Singh was shot in the battle. Winters had approached. This battle happened in September, and at these high altitude ranges, September after, it's very cold. It's really high altitude ranges, and I've been two times into this region, even to trace Guru Nanak's footsteps, and I know what the challenges are. Dealing with very little oxygen, fight a battle for Punjabis to fight a battle in the home turf of the Tibetans. You know the outcomes, right? But they stood there. They were very close from Taklakot. That's Taklakot, close to Lake Mansarovar, Mount Kailash. They died. They were very close to Nepal, very close. Had they been able to succeed in this and gone into Nepal, maybe history would have been different. Maybe not, because I also wonder how Lahore would have managed to get the supplies to the high altitude Tibetan plateau and go down the path. I don't know. At least on a bird's eye view, there was some aspiration there. And with that, I just want to show you the 1834 Ladakh, what Zorawar Singh made this as a fort, which today, in the Indian subcontinent, any post you put on the internet, the first response, and I've written 30 years in search of Zorawar Singh on my blog, amardeepphotography.com, and I am amused with the comments that come in. Sikhs say he was a Sikh. Hindus say he was a Dogra, and I say both of you have gone crazy. He was an employee of the Lahore Darbar. Forget his religion. Keep him where he is. Don't fight for religions of people, right? Give him a credit of being a person under the leadership of Ranjit Singh and having led an expansion to such far-flung lands. That's what he deserves. That's what we should respect, right? And thereafter, same Zorawar Singh, this is probably the last slide, went westwards, as I told you. I'll just go back a bit here to this. From Leh, the westward campaign to Baltistan, Skardu, where I've had an opportunity to go two times, because we also went to film for Guru Nanak's travels, and this was in 2019, but this picture is from 2018, 2017 and 2018 early. Harpocho Fort, which was under the Ahmad Shah, and 1840, the Zorawar Singh's forces reached here. This fort was won without a battle. Right hand side is the Skardu city. From the top of the fort, I've clicked it downwards, and I've had an opportunity to go inside the records, where in pre-partition and going back to the times of Ranjit Singh's, the records of lands and revenue records. On the revenue records, I've written in Urdu out here. It's a picture from the revenue records. It reads Khalsa Sarkar. Now, although the Khalsa Sarkar finished in 1849 and 1840 is the footprint that was there in Skardu, but yet the footprints are there in these records. We need to have the ability to look deep inside. And with that, I'm going to just play the last 1 minute video again to end with the emotions. And I'm bringing in the spiritual aspect of the emotions as I've gone through these journeys, and I'm continuing. It is a very emotional journey. Try and keep my emotions away. With this, we will end the presentation. I'm happy to take question answers. Apologies, I've gone a bit over here. But I did think that this presentation would take 1 hour. I think I've spoken for 1 hour and 10 minutes. We started a bit late. My apologies. I'll be happy to take question answers if the hosts allow that. But here's the video, and we'll end after that, and I'll pass it back to the host.
Close to the India-Pakistan border, the remains of the historic Chadisabe Gurdwara faintly whispered to me. It faintly whispered to me. In 1762, Ahmad Shah Abdali wiped out the Sikhs from the plains of the Punjab. Yet, they did not abandon these native lands of the five rivers. So why in the year 1947 they thoughtlessly abandoned these lands? Did they not have a responsibility towards us? The monuments which nourished their spiritual needs for hundreds of years? I touched its frail structure and sighed. It is this quest that has brought me to you. I may not be able to comprehend the reasons, but as you perish, let your soul find peace that finally a descendant of your architects was able to touch you in your final days. It heaved a sigh of relief and resonated. I can now perish in peace.
Thank you so much, and I'll pass it back. Um, I'll go back to here. And as I'm actually passing it back, should I give it to Sikh Heritage Month or to whom?
Sikh Heritage Month is okay.
Okay, I'm going here, and it does not, it says stop video and says chat pin spotlight for everyone. So can you just help me? Where do I need to actually?
Oh no, it's okay. I've made you a co-host, so we're both
Oh, all right, all right.
hosts for
So
this. Yeah,
ending. All right, so let me just say the last few words.
of course.
I can perish in peace. And sometimes I think, who are we? The storytellers, nothing else. But the particle in the wave or the wind that's thrusting us in different directions. We are no one, we are not capable of documenting these legacies. But some force, and I can't say why, it enables things. And as these monuments perish, sometimes I think, am I an opportunist who's trying to make stories out of them? I don't know. But I hope these stories last. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amardeep. All right, everyone, we are just wrapping up now. I would just like to hand it over to one of our team members, Navneet, to share a quick message with you all.
Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Amardeep for that wonderful presentation. It's been great. I just wanted to make a quick announcement that as a part of Sikh Heritage Month, we are selling merchandise online on our website, t-shirts and tote bags. All proceeds will go to the farmers movement in Punjab. So if you are able to go to our website, please, if you do want to purchase a tote bag or a t-shirt, please do, and all proceeds will go to the farmers movement. Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Navneet. Now, finally, I would just like to say thank you so much to Amardeep Singh for your time today. And thank you so much to everyone who joined in on today's event. I hope you all had a great time. Please do remember to visit sikhheritagemonth.ca to register for our Sikh Fest beginning this Saturday. And I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you.